Hello, my name is Nina, and I will be giving a lesson on the Spanish-American War and political cartoons. So the Spanish-American War, just a brief history. The war began because of the Cuban struggle for independence. Cuba was initially a Spanish colony that began to fight Spain for their independence, and then soon after, the Americans gained an interest in this particular war. The U.S. then decides to enter the war in April 1898, and the war soon after ends in August 1898 with America being victorious over Spain. The United States soon after signs the Treaty of Paris in 1899, and the Spanish agrees to give territories to the United States in exchange for $20 million. These territories included Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Although the Philippines had assumed that once the war was over, it would be its own self-governing nation. Though when the U.S. takes control, it did not allow this, and thus a war broke out again. But right after, America wins the war against the Philippines as well. So back during the time technology shifts, there's a rise in literacy rates, and more people are beginning to understand how to read and write. So naturally there's a greater demand of books, newspapers, and visual images such as political cartoons. So the political cartoons became very popular, and although it is a cartoon, these pieces of work are a pretty important part of history, as it gives us an idea of how Americans during that time felt and their role at the time period. It allows us to take a deeper look at the ideologies Americans had during the time and how the world was seen at that time period. So in the next slides, I'll be showing you some political cartoons, and something I want you to examine while viewing the image is what the visual imagery is and what they're communicating with symbols and the changes of these images across time. So just keep in mind some mental notes, because later on I'll ask you to write down your thoughts in your Wattpad journals and other questions and discussion topics. So these images are prior to the U.S. prevention into the war, and as you can see, examining the first image, Cuba is drawn as a white woman seeking protection from the U.S., who appears to be an Uncle Sam heroic type figure, protecting Cuba from, looks like Spain, which is a very dark, villainous, sneaky-like figure. And then in the other image, it shows Spain as a very barbaric-like, and it's a demonization of the Spanish, as the image is very violent looking, and it's just very, almost looks like an animal. And then, as we can see here, after the war, Cuba is still presented as a woman, though she is no longer white, and instead she's a darker complexion. And then in the second image, she appears to be hanging out of anarchy, which represents Cuba, and U.S. saving Cuba from the anarchy from below. So the first image, it appears to be the Spanish colonies as children. Interestingly, previous in the other images, they were instead like adults, but now they're depicted as children. And if you look closely, their faces are more exaggerated than the other children behind them. And the Uncle Sam figure is once again America that appears to be teaching the children. So thank you for viewing the lesson. So now I would like you to search on your own some Spanish-American War cartoons and discuss your findings and thoughts in the Wattpad journal. Some discussion topics and questions I'd like you to keep in mind is, how can we make sense of the transition of Cuba from being a white woman to a darkened complexion woman? Do you feel that there's any type of racial hierarchy given from U.S.? How might the ideas be affected by a domestic understanding of the race and sort of racial hierarchy at that time? And what do you just overall feel about the images that you find on your own? Do you feel that they are before the Spanish War, or after the Spanish War? So feel free to put that in your